How are you, Eric?
I'm good. Yeah, staying busy. You know
Yeah,
how school district work is.
yeah, I can imagine. It's so good to see you. Well, I want to start by welcoming all of our viewers to the inaugural SELLY Award celebration, the Social and Emotional Learning Leaders of the Year Award, hosted by CASEL. I'm Janice Jackson, CEO of Hope Chicago, formerly with Chicago Public Schools, and a huge supporter of SEL as I am a member of the CASEL board. At CASEL, we believe that great moments are built on collaboration with others to produce rich insights, biggest impacts, and the best outcomes in support of our children. To recognize outstanding achievements and encourage high standards in the field of social and emotional learning, CASEL presents awards annually in the areas of research, practice, and public policy. This week, we are celebrating our 2021 recipients. Today, I am honored to chat with one of those recipients of the Mary Utne O'Brien Award for Excellence in Expanding the Evidence-Based Practice of Social and Emotional Learning, Mr. Eric Moore. This award was established in 2011 to honor the memory and dedication of Mary Utne O'Brien, former CASEL Executive Director and key leader in the field of SEL. It's an honor to be with you again, Eric. I have followed your work for the past 5 years, and I can't think of a person more deserving of this incredible award. So welcome today. We're going to jump right in with a few questions. I know a lot of people watching this want to learn from your practices as they are in various states of implementation in their respective districts and states. So let's start by having you describe, why is SEL so important at this moment in our schools, given where we are in the middle of a pandemic?
No, absolutely, Janice. And I want to say that I've been such a fan of yours, and it's such an honor that you've been following my work and obviously the work of Minneapolis Public Schools. I mean, I think there's just a number of amazing people from the superintendent, senior leadership, principals, our teachers, and most important, our amazing students. So just an honor. I'll try not to be starstruck here having you interview me. This is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And then the honor is just was such a surprise, but I think that, you know, we do what we do on behalf of our children and our families, and so it's the right work to do. I can't think of a more important mission in terms of embedding social emotional learning and equity in all aspects of organizations at this period of time, and particularly in Minneapolis with the murder of Mr. George Floyd. You know, certainly that has impacted our people of color, has always been, you know, the negative experiences in some cases with authority, particularly law enforcement. But as a city awakens, and then now as we moved into social media, and it's literally every day you're seeing some type of violence against people of color, and in my case, African American people. I just think our emotions really have to be adhered to. We really have to be able to be comfortable addressing and discussing how we feel in the spaces we're in our current context. Then the pandemic hit, and we have, thinking today, I had a school visit, watching a number of folks that are dysregulated, both teachers as well as students, parents, and we need to recognize the humanity of people right now. And it has implications for equity. And if we do this work well, I do think that we can address a lot of systemic disparities that we've seen in education, both from my grandfather was a former principal to now the work that I've done. I've always believed, and I believe even more so now, that social and emotional learning integrated into all of our systems, from policy to the way schools organized, to the daily interactions with the adults, teachers, our educational service professionals, is critical, and I've seen it make a difference. So I think it's time, and I've seen the integration over the years, but more so than ever is critical.
Yeah. And what's interesting is you've been at this work for a while now, and Minnesota Public Schools is a leader because of your leadership and the leadership of some of the others you lifted up earlier. So it's really important for those who are at different entry points on their journey to hear from leaders like you. As an SEL award recipient, what has been your area of focus with SEL implementation in Minneapolis? You have alluded to some of that, but want you to take us through that journey, where you started, kind of where you are now. And then what have you learned that you think is instructive for folks who are just starting this journey?
Janice, I've been very blessed to have the opportunity in Minneapolis to serve under some amazing leaders and have the opportunity to interact with amazing leaders. Carol Johnson, former Minneapolis yes, I love Carol Johnson. Didn't have a chance to work under her, but she's guided my thought leadership. And so Carol has an amazing legacy here. Dr. Bernadette Johnson is another person. She actually hired me into the district, current superintendent at Graff. And so you take away learnings and wisdom from just amazing people that you have the opportunity to interact with. Crazy idea is, when Superintendent Graff took on the position, had an idea for him, which was, let's take accountability, research evaluation assessment, and equity, and have that in the same division. And we were very conscious of combining our equity and social emotional learning departments together too, because we were very clear that you can't do social emotional learning, particularly in urban district, without talking about equity and identity and the fact that our emotions are impacted by how we engage with others. So the fact that, depending on the space I'm in as an African-American man, I'm showing up very differently, both in terms of how I think about myself, but also the feedback I get from others. The work of Camille Farrington, as I had a chance to work with her, and the amazing work of identifying the fact that our social emotional learning competency skills as measured, they change depending upon the context. So that really had me think deeply, as we did the research here in Minneapolis, about just the power of the adult. We intuitively know this, but the power of the adult in creating spaces for our children to be their best selves. And so we've really focused on climate. We've developed a new climate framework in which we're looking at areas such as equity, representation, and racism, shared decision-making and power, physical and emotional safety and well-being, right? So we believe that the physical space matters. When you look in school districts, and we've all experienced this, particularly in urban districts, you can go to one side of the city and the buildings are immaculate and beautiful. You go to another and they're older and they're unclean. And I started to see the relationship, and we've seen the relationship between how the buildings look and the skin color of the students. And so we wanted to raise that up and say that impacts how students think about themselves as scholars, as learners. The physical space matters. The extent to which your building is clean matters. So that's part of the framework. Relationships, trust, and communication. We want to recognize that because of our historical narrative, people don't feel that our predominantly white institutions are spaces in which their voices can be heard. So when we think about the transformative SEL work, voice identity agency, we try to build our climate framework around those areas and look at classroom, how does it show up in our staffing, family and community engagement, and in our buildings. So that's something. I'm really proud about the work we've done around voice. So our student voice and parent voice. And so when I started here, we've had, we call it the youth participatory evaluation. We developed a program around 2017 in a response to the Office of Civil Rights agreement regarding suspensions. We're disproportionately suspending Black and brown children. And so we were asked to get feedback from students, and we said, well, wait a minute, why don't we develop a program, because I'm an evaluator and a researcher, in which we're teaching students data collection skills, critical skills and critical analysis, and let them define things that are meaningful to them. And so every middle and high school has a youth participatory evaluation group, and in which they're collecting information. I will share they've connected that information for numerous years, and that actually supported our boundary change, the voices. We've had 3 years of parent participatory evaluation, and we did a similar model, training parents on data collection methods across different racial and ethnic groups. And that's been extremely powerful. Both programs center the voices of the folks we're supposed to serve. But the data is systematically collected, and that's really led to some significant policy changes. We've been able to use the voices of our parents and students to support boundary changes and how we define what quality teaching is, how we define what quality leadership is. We have now a student who's on the school board. We're now compensating students for citywide student government. So those two programs have been powerful. In fact, one of the things I'm most proud of is this summer, we decided to do something different with our workshop week. So typically you pay for outside presenters, keynotes to launch your year. We decided to have our parents and our students be our keynote. So they launched our year, and our student board member, Mary Deborah Mesco, she actually facilitated the panel. We didn't have any district people on the panel, and it was just our parents and students talking about what they needed. Then we had our teachers and staff at their individual buildings write a commitment. Because one of the things I said is like, we have to get past collecting information from communities of color, traditionally marginalized communities, and not having the feedback loop, right? Because when you do that, you just reinforce the lived experiences of people of color throughout history. So we've been very conscious of having feedback loop, both to our youth as well as our families. And so that's been something critical. And then I have to say that the area of assessment, is something in terms of measurement has been a priority as well. So, but I think climate and student voice, I'm really excited about the student voice piece, because we've been able to drive a lot of policy changes now that we've done that for multiple years. And I think also developing some significant trusting relationships with the communities that we're tasked to serve. We even used youth voice to support school name changes at one of our schools. And so, but it's all about recentering the voices of our students and
yeah, those are incredibly powerful practices. And I heard you say so much. So it's obviously clear why you are the recipient of the SEL award this year. But I just love the way you've centered student and parent voice. It is powerful to give them a platform to speak directly to district leaders and decision makers. And I love the call out around closing that feedback loop, right? Yes. Because that's typically where we fall off. We have a lot of efforts to get the word out and engage people, but the final step, and this is a good lesson and pro tip for folks listening, is to really make sure you're closing that loop. That's how you develop and foster trusting relationships.
Yes,
I think I know the answer to the next question because you talked a little bit about it, but what should practitioners be paying attention to right now? A lot has occurred over the past, almost 2 years. There's a lot to unpack, a lot to get done, a lot to consider. What should be done? What should people be paying attention to?
I've been thinking a lot about, obviously with the pandemic, the importance of people being heard, valued, and seen, and how institutions support that. And I think there's a lot of work around identity, and this is where you look at the relationship between social emotional learning and equity. Because we experience situations very differently. We show up very differently depending on the context that we're in, the time, the space. I'm very aware, because of recent events, that people are wanting things done. The pace of change has accelerated. And as leaders, we have to meet that pace of change. And I say that from someone who is a student of movements. And I know how long it takes to change institutions, but our communities, people we're serving, communities of color, students, families, they're wanting the pace of change to be accelerated, still with a level of excellence, but the pace of change. And we have to, as leaders, in whatever field we're in, we have to meet that pace. And that requires us to rethink how we do our work, and also to resource it. But I think that's something, just the identity, like for me, even as an African-American leader, how I see myself in the question of what does it mean to be an African-American leader in a public education system that has significant gaps in achievement between white students and students of color, or disproportionate suspension rates, right? And I look at advanced courses, but that's a question given the recent events of the murder of George Floyd and looking at disparities around technology because of the pandemic. And January 6th, you had the insurrection at the Capitol. Like, all these events have really caused me to re-examine who I am. And I think that, where the field needs to move is just really honoring identity. I really love the transformative SEL model. And I was very blessed to be in the room, as Rob Jagers talked about that vision. But I think the transformative SEL model focusing on voice, identity, agency, it's wonderful that CASEL has incorporated that into their model, because it feels significantly more inclusive in terms of the lived experience of everyone that can benefit from social emotional learning.
Wow. My final question, and I think you started this already, is what advice do you have for folks who are leading SEL in their districts or in their states? And what is the charge for this next generation of SEL leaders?
Man, I think my growth process has really been to, my growth to my leadership is just to be more human. And when I was originally tasked with the concept of leadership, and you get trained on how to be a leader and whatever credentials, you really don't talk about the need to be so self-aware. And it isn't emphasized the ability to have relationships with people and to share power. And so that's a different model of leadership, but not only individually, but then how do we have our organizations and systems honor those values? And so I'm really interested in examining some of the non-traditional areas. So yes, academic integration we need to do, but we also have to have our systems of accountability more human. And we also have to have our performance management systems, human resources, right, and operations areas. So I'm really interested in looking at things such as operations, human resources. We just developed, for example, a set of equity competencies and social emotional learning competencies. And we're going to use those competencies and infuse that in our performance management system for principals, teachers, and central office staff. And we're going to have professional development that supports that, right? But it's important for systems to declare what their values are, and then to support that in all aspects of the organization, including the professional development. But that's different work. I think that because what we're trying to do is redefine, what does a quality educator look like, right? And when I came in the field, it was conversations such as, well, they're incredible on their content, or they're an amazing leader, they just need to work on equity. And I was like, well, no, you're not. In order to be a quality educator, you do have to have, right, a proficiency in these competencies, and you do have to lead with an equity mindset, and you do have to commit yourself in service of equity. And so I like the field to explore areas such as human resources and operations and finance, in addition to doing the difficult work of academic integration. I mean, that's still the work, but we don't pay attention to the structures that support what happens to the classroom. And so then we're never able to do anything systemic. And so that's been a mission and that I've really zeroed in on, I think, the past couple of years, is working with those divisions to make sure that everyone is doing social emotional learning and service equity. So I like the field to explore in districts, to explore those areas and do the support professional development and areas, for our bus drivers and our building engineers and our folks that serve our food. They're so important. And so everyone needs to be part of this movement.
No, I think that's wonderful. And to your point, the next edge of growth in this work, if we make it an add-on or we only focus on it from the academic standpoint, we miss a whole opportunity to improve communities, right?
Yes.
I would even add to your wonderful comments around economic disparities in the community.
Yes.
That play out into what happens in schools. And so, operations, HR matter a whole lot, but we need to be looking at procurement and so many other things as well. equity, it matters in a lot of different ways. And obviously from listening to you're so advanced in this work. So again, no secret why you were chosen for this amazing honor today. But I want to thank you for coming on and helping to share some of your best practices and your wisdom over time. I think everybody tuning into this can see your commitment to advancing SEL is clear. And I want to leave you with any final thoughts that you want to share with the group before we close out.
Final thoughts. I think it's really cool that Janice, you said I was advanced, so that was really cool. I do want to say that someone who's passed recently, Roger Weisberg, as someone who meant a lot to me, and I had the opportunity to serve with him on the assessment work group. So want to do this work, continue to do this work on behalf of kids, but also for his legacy. I mean, years and years of his hard work, and obviously Mary O'Brien, just honored to be have an award now, recipient named after her. Two others, Ben Hayes and Gene Wing. Ben Hayes was a leader in Washoe County, and Gene King was also a leader in Oakland Public Schools. And so both of them, I served on the assessment work group, and they just taught me a ton. So I think whenever you're having the opportunity and you've been blessed with having the opportunity to lead and serve, I think it's just important to acknowledge those that have also been doing the work. And so those are 4 people I just wanted to mention. But I'm just excited and fired up and to be the recipient of the award, and committed to keep doing the work, because I do think that this is the critical work we need to do on behalf of our students and families. And it's such a critical juncture in our society with the level of polarization, lack of trust that's happening. So just committed to working together and doing the work. So Janice, thank you for taking the time to ask me thoughts, and also thank you to CASEL Board of Directors for recognizing the work in Minneapolis Public Schools. I mean, it's amazing people here.
Well, thank you. And well said. And I think the most appropriate way to end this discussion, you definitely lifted up giants in this field, and you should count yourself amongst them. And we're trying to encourage many, many more. So we hope that you have enjoyed this, and we encourage you to tune in for the rest of the conversations that we will be hosting this week. We also encourage you to share this with your community and to post and amplify on social media. Thank you again for your time.
Hey, thank you. It's wonderful to be part of this.
All right. Bye. Take care.